Rodney Schmaltz. And he is an associate professor of psychology at McEwen University up in Edmonton. And he specializes in scientific features of skepticism and misinformation. He's presented at national and international conferences, including TEDx, where he explored how skepticism can foster empathy. His research examines how people evaluate extraordinary claims, why this information is so persuasive, and the challenges of promoting science literacy, not literature.
Either one. They're both good.
They're both good. And I actually had the privilege of pegging along with Rodney on a ghost hunt with his fourth year students. It was so much fun. And I'm hoping to do it again. And
Yes.
in honor of Rodney, I'm wearing this t-shirt that says, I hope it's a ghost next time. So David's gonna sign one next time. And if you want one yourself, it's on Thinking is Power with Melanie Tracy King, who is another really great person. He talks about science literacy. Now, regarding the questions. Yes, he has seen a solar eclipse. Or no, he has not seen. Oh my goodness, I can't read all right. Do you know what's really fun? I was going to be really classy and use this for my notes. But then I remember I'm old and I can't read. So here we go, I'm still not reading apparently. So he's not seen a solar eclipse. However, he once embarked on a journey to a convenience store to get a moon pie while wearing sunglasses, and he thinks that counts.
I think so.
Regarding traveling to Australia, now you notice I'm tall. He's tall. Can you imagine in economy? We have to fold him in. And see, he says it sounds like a test of both flexibility and sanity, and I would agree. He requires so many in-flight mini buttons to make it tolerable that he'd miss the eclipse entirely. So as a tall person, he felt a short standing, or as a tall person, as I say, I feel really short standing with him, or I love that. So the dog and cat thing, I love his answer. Snoopy Fox, red merit, could dance on a piano, and was an accomplished author. However, Garfield hated Mondays and ate lasagna. While Eileen Cat, well, he leans cat, he aspires to dog. And here's the ghost hunting guru, Dr. Rodney Schmaltz.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to try it. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? The back? All right. For about the past 15 years or so, I have been teaching a course on pseudoscience here at McEwen University. A couple weeks ago, I was talking to a colleague and friend. He teaches neuropsychopharmacology, and he just lectured for 80 minutes on postsynaptic action potentials. And I said, that's interesting. I was just talking about Bigfoot. Turns out the evidence, not great. And he shook his head and he seemed to imply, well, and with his words, that my course perhaps is easier to teach than his course. Respectfully, I disagree. In his course, he doesn't have students coming in saying, well, neuroscience isn't even really a thing anyway, is it? I do. So I teach about things like ghosts. I teach about alternative medicine, cryptozoology, conspiracy theories. People come in with a lot of preconceived notions, and it can be really difficult to change these ideas, and it can be difficult to promote rational thinking. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, is some of the strategies I use to do that. I'll talk a little bit about some of the research I do in this area, and finish with a few tips to just think about when we're generally talking to people who may believe some things that are not supported by good evidence. So in the class, this is a 400 level class, I start with this question. And I tell the class, we're going to start easy, what is science? And everybody laughs. But then I say, really, I want somebody to answer, what is science? And then they do that thing where they all put their heads down like I can't see them anymore. Eventually somebody will get close, but a lot of people are spitting back what you hear in popular media, that science is a body of knowledge or a collection of facts and that science can't prove everything. What science really is, as you all know, it's a systematic approach to evidence. And I've taken this definition from Scott Lilienfeld, and it's a good one. Basically, at its core, science is a way of collecting data and controlling biases. That's what it is. It's a method. And that's what I talk about throughout the course. Specifically, I'm talking about scientific skepticism. And I like Sagan's definition of this. I want my students to remain open-minded. I'm not trying to create a class of cynics. And if there's some extraordinary claims, great, let's test them, but we don't accept them unless they have survived the scrutiny of rigorous scientific tests. And that's basically what the class is about. In a sense, really, it's almost a research methods class. We're trying to think about the best ways to test things, and as a psychologist, what I'm also interested in, what I talk to my students about, is why we believe. There are some fairly strange things that very intelligent people believe. Why? I spend hours talking about different biases, so several classes. So I'm talking about how the brain works. We're pattern seekers. We are belief engines. I believe Michael Shermer said that. So we can look at these biases and start to understand why people believe strange things. Arguably, the most powerful of these biases is probably confirmation bias. So we feel good when we find information that we agree with. Now that might sound a bit simplistic, but in fact, when we find information that supports our beliefs, we get a little hit of dopamine. And that's a neurotransmitter associated with pleasurable emotions. If we find evidence that does not support our beliefs, we tend to deny it, dismiss it, ignore it, and so on. So there's big hurdles to overcome when we're trying to get people to think rationally. If you believe something and find evidence that supports it, you actually physiologically feel better. So what we have to do in classes like this, when we're talking to people that have some beliefs that maybe, again, aren't supported by evidence, we have to overcome those hurdles. And that's why this is so hard. I like to talk to my students early on, too, about who falls prey. Real photo.
It's not blurry.
Yeah, exactly. That's not blurry, that's true, that's how you know it's a fake. We all fall prey. Anybody can fall prey, right? And my guess is, with most of you here and myself included, at some point you probably believed in some form of pseudoscience. And then as you learn more about it and realize that there's no evidence to support that belief, you probably became more interested in other beliefs. That's certainly where I came from. And when you're talking to people that have these beliefs, such as students, it's really important for me to emphasize that this has nothing to do with IQ. I know I'm going to challenge some people's beliefs. That's the nature of the course. But I start early by talking about IQ. In fact, what's interesting about IQ is that there's a positive association with high IQ and being able to defend your beliefs, but a negative correlation with hearing alternative positions. What that means is that people who have a high IQ tend to be very good at defending, but they're not very good at hearing other opinions or perspectives. So we can then frame, and I frame an entire course around it, but we can frame discussions around that. It's nothing to do with your intelligence. In fact, if you're intelligent and you believe in something pseudoscientific, you're probably really good at defending it. Again, tough to overcome these hurdles, right? So I like to start with some fairly simplistic examples. I don't like to jump into the really controversial stuff first. I start with something maybe a little tamer, such as fairies. Now, most people are probably familiar with the Cottingley fairies. If you're not, this was a hoax perpetrated around 1920. It was in a magazine called Strand. There was photos of fairies of the Cottingley Grove. And this was perpetrated by two girls, 10 and 16. Now, this is easily debunked, right? So if you look at this photo here, right off the bat, you can see what one of the problems are, probably. So she is blurry, that is one of the girls, and the fairy is still. So that implies that the fairy is static, right? Whereas she must have moved during the exposure of the camera. That alone really debunks it. And eventually the girls confessed, And the fairies came from Princess Mary's gift book, which came out in 1915. You can see the fairies as well as the pictures from the gift book. So a fairly simple hoax, but this guy believed it. That is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He is the author of Sherlock Holmes. This is a great example because he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He wrote Sherlock Holmes, but he fell prey to the Cottingley fairy hoax. And he actually fell prey to a lot of different types of hoaxes. He was a big proponent of spiritualism, so this idea that we can communicate with the dead and so on. Now, interestingly, he was friends with Harry Houdini. Houdini, the world-famous magician, was also a skeptic, and after some of his performances, he would actually talk about and debunk some of the things that the spiritualists were saying. So they were friends for a while, but eventually they disagreed too much, and there was a falling out, which is an interesting story in itself, but we can talk about that after. So how prevalent is pseudoscience? I will throw some stats at my students, let them know exactly what's going on, the billions of dollars wasted on alternative medicine. But as I said, it's difficult to change people's minds, right? And if you just throw numbers at people, we know people aren't very good at working with statistics. So I want them out doing stuff. I've created the Pseudoscience Super Challenge. My class has about 20 students in it. Sometimes it goes up to 24. I have them break into pairs. And what the challenge is they have 20 minutes to go find an example of pseudoscience. One that is not online, they just can't look at their phone, something physical. We're on a university campus, they have 20 minutes. And to make it motivating, whoever wins gets a cup of coffee. All right? So that's 2 cups. I actually used to go get the coffee, but somebody once ordered like a triple latte chai, blah, 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 and I couldn't remember it, so they get gift cards now. 20 minutes. I've been doing this for about 15 years. Only once has a group not found an example of pseudoscience. Only once. Now think about that. They're on a university campus. I allow them to leave campus. They're not allowed to drive. I don't want anybody to get in a car accident. But within 20 minutes, they all find something. And that's really powerful, and I'd argue more powerful than just citing a bunch of statistics because pseudoscience is all around us. And then I ask them to just keep their eyes open. See what else is out there. When you're walking around, have a look. And I get them to bring me stuff too, so I get all kinds of interesting things. So somebody sent me this one. That's a textbook of psychology for homeopathic students. I'm not sure what a homeopathic student is. I think it's just a little bit of a student. But I don't know how it works. I also teach them how to become psychics. Now, most of the students are actually quite good in their beliefs of pseudoscience, but there's some areas where they're a bit shaky. Psychics are one of them, naturopaths is another. So I show them some psychics in action, similar to what Susan was talking about today, and then I train them how to become a psychic. Do you know how long it takes to train someone to become a psychic? 45 minutes. 45 minutes. They're not great, but they're good. They're as good as some of the ones that Susan showed today, for sure. So I use a lot of what Ray Hyman did. Ray, who I think is 96 now, Professor Emeritus of Psychology at the University of Oregon, and arguably one of the founders of the skeptical movement, along with James Randi, Martin Gardner, and so on. And he's given several seminars on how to do cold reading. So I have my students do cold readings. And we won't go through all of that. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the techniques of cold reading, but basically look at the person, kind of work your way down, start and see what their haircut looks like, which sometimes doesn't work. Then work your way down, see what they're wearing and so on, see if they're wearing a wedding ring, and you can learn a lot about someone. Then I teach them about hot reading, and I basically have them hot read themselves. Go online, see how much information you can find about yourself. And next, I have them create a Forer statement or a Barnum statement. So just a general statement that could apply to anyone. So again, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but I thought I'd just show you what some of these statements are, what they sound like. Now, this original work by Forer, and that's him there, what he did is he gave students a personality test, got the results back, and then said, I'm going to craft a description that is unique to you. In fact, what he did was give everybody the same description back. So everybody got the same description. They didn't know that, of course. And then they're asked on a scale of 1 to 5, how well does this relate to you? And the average was around 4.2 in terms of how well it related. So everybody thought it related well to them. So I won't read the whole statement, but it was things like, at times you're extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times you're introverted, wary, and reserved. That covers it. That should do it. So I have my students create these statements, then they do readings with one another. And some of them had been to psychics before, and then it just kind of like a light bulb goes like, oh, that's what they're doing. And what's really cool is they talk to their friends and they talk to their family. And I've had several students say, you know, my mom used to go to a psychic and I told her what we did and explained it. She stopped going. Yeah. So that is fantastic. I do spend a lot of time talking about how we think. And as I mentioned earlier, I spend quite a bit of time talking about how do we actually test these claims, which again can be difficult. So what I've done is I have partnered with the Center for Inquiry Investigations group who hosts the Paranormal Challenge. So the Paranormal Challenge is an offer of $500,000 to anyone that can show any kind of paranormal ability under controlled experimental conditions. So they get applications in. If it's at all remotely testable, they have to write up some way to test it. They work with the applicant. They want to make sure that the test is fair. And what I've been doing in my class is we've been getting the actual applications, and my students are designing the protocols. Then we watch the test after. Now, there are several testing sites throughout the US. There's a few in Canada. There's not one in Edmonton, so we do it over Zoom. Most of the applicants will agree to some form of test, but then they won't show up, or some just kind of stop responding to the emails. But over the past couple of years, we've been able to test 3. So I'll tell you about what we tested. And again, this was done over Zoom. The first person we tested claimed they could control smoke. Specifically, what they said is that if there's smoke, they can make it rise straight up to 8 feet. So if you blow out a candle, there'll be some smoke, they can make it go up to 8 feet. So the test we devised, or the test my students devised, was that there would be 2 incense burning, 2 incense sticks. And we would roll some dice, and if it was odd or even, they'd have to go left or right and try to make that stream go up. There were 20 trials, they had to hit 18. Now remember, the claim was that it could get to 8 feet. They were right on 11 out of the 20 trials. It never got to 8 feet though. So that was a fail. Then we had somebody that could touch people telepathically. Yeah, just think that through for you. So we set up a test, and again, we work with the applicants. We work with the applicants through the investigations group, so we don't have direct contact with them. I don't want the students contacting them, but I work with Stan West and Randy Westendorf, and they contact the applicants, so we go back and forth. And they agreed to this test. What we did is we had a student stand behind the Zoom, and they stood like this, and the person claimed they would be able to shake their hands telepathically, okay? So again, we rolled dice, and there were 3 conditions this time. It was either no touch, left hand, or right hand. So we'd roll the dice over Zoom. We'd tell a person which hand to shake or none, and then they'd try to do it. And the person who wouldn't be able to see our student volunteer wouldn't know what condition they were in, and they had to say if they felt anything on either hand. Now this was an interesting one. We put a lot of work into this, and I realized just as it started, we made a huge mistake. Why would we have a no-touch condition? It's always going to be no touch. So the trial is starting, and I thought, wouldn't it be something if we just kept rolling no touch? And they've never had anyone, so you have to pass 2 tests to get the $500,000, but nobody's ever passed the preliminary test. And it's like, oh, it's gonna be me. We're gonna be the ones that failed at this. And what happened, the first 3 rolls were no touch. And I was just dying inside. But they had to hit 20 trials. Things started to balance out, and after about 11 or 12 trials, they stopped. And the last one we just tested, and the investigations group just wrote this up on their website a couple days ago. This is a webcam with, or this is a Zoom photo with several webcams, and these are all live weather streams. What the person claimed they could do is clear weather with their mind. So, what they said is they could do all 10 of these weather cameras, and they said it would slowly just start to clear. Now, she had actually been tested the year before in Las Vegas and tried to do it in person, failed, but wanted to try again with this technique. So it was 2 hours that she had to clear all 10 cameras. She had to hit all of them. After an hour and a half, she said that she didn't think it was going quite how she hoped, and here's how it looked after an hour and a half. So here's where we started, and here's where we finished. In fairness, these clouds moved back a little bit, I guess. What was really interesting is that she said, you know, you can see that it's clearly starting to work, right? But we're very respectful.
Did you change slot? Are you sure you changed?
No, I did. I promise. It's funny you asked that, because when I built this, I looked at it, I was like, did I do this right? Did I put the same? No, I did. So thank you for that. And she blamed one thing. She said, you know what the problem was the atmosphere. Well, yeah, that's kind of the thing. But what's really interesting about this, with all 3 tests that we were able to conduct, everybody who applied to do it, the actual applicants, extremely nice, and all were disappointed, and all were going to try again. They did not see what happened as any form of showing that they don't have this power. They just didn't see it like that. Now, this was really good for my students on a few fronts. We didn't want it to be, you know, people coming across as very odd or strange. So just normal people. For some reason, they came up with these beliefs, and they still believed it after. So she is going to try again next year. If you do this, you have to wait a year before you can try again. So she's going to wait a year and try again. Okay, this is really interesting. So what I thought I'd do, I'm just going to do 5 minutes for this. On your table, there are some sheets. And if you don't have one, I've got QR codes here. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'll show you the applications we get. And there's not much. So I've got one with changing height. So the person claimed they could change their height by a few inches, but they needed a vacuum to do it. We don't know why, but this person can read books when they're closed. Person can predict the future in their dreams. Someone could move things with their mind, and a person can make things happen simply by thinking about them. So what I'd like you to do is kind of take the role of my students when we do this, see if you can quickly build a test. And so just get a sense of what we're dealing with. I'll give you 4 or 5 minutes on that. We'll have a super quick chat about it. And I can put this up again later today, or come talk to me if you want to read the rest of them. But check it out. See if you can put something together really quick. I know it's not much time. Yeah, so if you're in the thought manifestation group, almost it doesn't make sense what they're saying, but they do claim that they can change what's on the radio. Chat with people about this later. Let's just do one. Let's do one. You know which one is surprisingly hard? Is changing height. Because the person said they can change their height by a few inches. Now, I'm about to blow your minds and demonstrate what they're doing. That's it. So how do we test it, right? So like, what do we do? So did anybody tackle changing height? Did you come up with any ideas?
I just said that it would have to really narrow down a specific situation to find the variables and create on it to figure out, okay, I do this happens.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Did you want to add anything? Yeah, go ahead.
I said use multiple vacuums.
Pardon?
I said use multiple different vacuums.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so with the vacuums, it had to be at their feet, and then they would make them shrink because of the sun. I don't know. All right, I'm sorry, I only have time for one. Otherwise, we want to be able to finish up. But I would love to chat with people about it after, so at the break or at the dinner tonight. So a couple of the other areas that I talk about, conspiracy theories can be quite difficult to discuss because the people that believe them tend to believe them very strongly for the most part. I like the way Mick West looks at it. So everyone probably falls somewhere on a conspiracy scale. Now, if you're at the bottom, it might be a conspiracy like, well, I don't think 9/11 was an inside job, but I do think the government's hiding something. Okay, you're probably down here somewhere, right? But on the flip side, you may believe that there is reptile hybrids that are controlling the earth and that all of our politicians or anyone in power is part reptile. That's up here. Now, and Mick West points this out, it's pretty tough to change these people's minds. That's really hard. But you have a good shot when you kind of get down into this side of the scale. The way I like to get my students to think about it is I have them create their own conspiracy. So I tell them exactly what a conspiracy theory is, what the components are, then have them make one. And how easy it is to make one. And I'll show you my favorite. So my students created this image. It's a GIF, I'll show you in a second. But what they said was, we figured it out. This class is a conspiracy. What you're doing is hiding the real truth by portraying this as the real truth. And we have evidence. So they got me. I apologize to everyone here for my part reptileness. I talk a lot about ghosts. People are fascinated by ghosts. Canadians, about 30 to 40%, believe things like houses can be haunted, we can communicate with the dead, and so on. There's even a series of coins and stamps celebrating Canada's ghosts. If anybody is planning to go to Banff after the conference, there's a ghost supposedly in the Fairmont there in the Banff Springs Hotel. The story is that a bride was about to walk down some stairs. There's candles there. She lit on fire and she tumbled down the stairs and died. Now you can feel her there and it gets cold, or you can see this ghostly specter dancing and so on. Now what's interesting is if you do a search of Fairmont hotels across the country, there's some variation of this in most of them. So I guess like the Fairmonts are just a terrible place to get married. One of the things I really like to get my students thinking about is, okay, so there's this background, let's start looking for some evidence, right? And I wanted to find out the real story of the bride. So I searched everywhere, looked at newspapers, anything I could find, no mention of the bride. Now think about this story. Somebody who's getting married tumbled to their death in a ball of flames. That's got to make the news, right? And somebody proposed to me, like, well, maybe there were more important things going on. So I looked at other articles at the time, so I don't know the exact date, but roughly around the time. And there were articles like, local bingo tonight. I think this is more interesting than that. So we do a ghost hunt in my class. Again, we've done this for about 15 years. What we do is we find a supposedly haunted location in Edmonton. We do some research on it, and we use the same tools as the ghost hunters you see on TV and online. In our last ghost hunt, as you mentioned, we were very happy to have Adrian and Kat there. They made an episode of the Skeptic Zone based on our ghost hunt. This one was at Concordia University. We're looking for a ghost named Larry, the least scary ghost name of all time. Larry the Ghost. I've also been very happy to have guest speakers come in. So I've had Adrienne come in. She's talked about the Winchester Mystery House. She's talked about spirit boxes. I'm not going to have time to talk about alternative medicine today, but I do talk about it a lot in class. I've been very happy to have Kat come in and tell her story, and it just blows the students' minds. So if you don't know that, talk to Kat later about it. It is very, very interesting and terrifying. A lot of what we're doing, we're not disproving ghosts. We can't do that. But we can start to think about the techniques that ghost hunters use and see if we can come up with a better explanation than somebody who's back from the dead, right? So I'll give you an example. I invited Kieran O'Keefe to give a talk at MacEwan several years ago. You may be familiar with him. He was on Most Haunted. He was the resident skeptic. So he'd go into castles and basically say, no ghosts here. And so I brought him there, brought him to MacEwan, and supposedly the Hotel MacDonald is haunted. So we took him there. We thought we'd do a little ghost hunt with Kieran for fun, went for a few beers. we talked to the server and we explained what we were doing. And the server said, oh, the ghost. Okay. What it is, there's tin on the roof. The ghost is supposedly a horse-drawn carriage. It sounds like galloping. It's actually just ice falling on the tin. It kind of, sort of sounds like galloping. That's it. Like, okay. But then they leaned in and said, the real ghosts are on the 6th floor. Thank you. Now, they wouldn't tell us which rooms. They're afraid nobody would stay there. And what the ghost did was this. When the cleaning staff were in the room, they would take shampoo bottles and move them. I know, I'm sorry. I know, it's terrifying. So let's look at this in terms of Occam's razor. The idea that the simplest explanation is probably the correct one, or the more parsimonious explanation. Okay, we have two competing hypotheses here. One is that someone has come back from the dead, and they can actually control objects in the physical world. What do they use this power for? To slightly annoy the cleaning staff at the Fairmont Hotel. Alternative hypothesis, the cleaning staff cleaned hundreds of rooms. They may have forgotten they moved a bottle and just attributed that to ghosts. That is a much simpler explanation, and it is probably the correct one. So when I talked to Kieran about how we should go about doing this many, many years ago when we started doing our ghost hunting, what typically happens on TV is they bring a psychic. And I didn't want to do that for two reasons. One is that if the person actually believes they're psychic, I don't think that's really fair to them. They're coming into not a hostile environment, but we're all skeptics. And two, if they are just faking it, which is quite plausible, I'm not giving them money. So, what do we do instead? We bring a Ouija board. Good enough. So the Ouija board, as you know, works with an ideomotor response. We make these unconscious movements. We don't really realize we're doing it. Basically, when you're driving, your hands are always kind of moving a little bit, but you don't realize it. It's the same thing with a Ouija board. So if you want to debunk a Ouija board, all you have to do is blindfold the people using it. If you can't see it, it doesn't work. So theoretically, if it's actually communication with the dead, shouldn't matter if you're blindfolded or not. Blindfold somebody, turn the board upside down, the effect is totally gone. But we bring it in, and the problem, so it wasn't, my Ouija board was broken. And let me tell you why. It wasn't because I wasn't communicating with the dead, it's because there was too much friction, so it wouldn't move. So I had to find another Ouija board. It works a bit better, so the students actually get the experience of the tablet starting to move a bit. The other thing I've done, for those of you that were here last year and saw Richard Sanders talk, he talked about dowsing rods. I found dowsing rods that douse for ghosts. And it's usually water, but these ones douse for ghosts. So we use that too in lieu of a psychic. And it's amazing. They were $15 and you can find ghosts and water. So it's great. So again, one of the reasons I don't like to invite psychics is I don't want to invite that kind of chicanery to the class. I'll just show you a very short example that Kieran set up here. So as I said, Kieran was on Most Haunted, and they had a psychic. His name was Derek Akura. And he had some celebrity in the UK. I think he still does a little bit. And Kieran, the resident skeptic, was very skeptical of Derek. So Derek, as an example, went into this castle, put his hands on this bed that had supposedly been there for hundreds of years, and then just told this amazing backstory, which was all true. And he said he got it from the bed. The problem was, it was the wrong bed. The bed was actually on the floor above. This was a different bed. So what Kieran did is he told some of the crew on the show that, okay, when we go to this next one, there is supposedly a haunting of someone named Creed Kafer, okay? And he went into a bunch of details about Creed Kafer, but he said, whatever you do, don't tell Derek. I want to see if Derek can find Creed Kafer. So let's see what happened. Whoa. That's Derek. And that's Kieran hugging him, trying to bring him back. So as you see, that is an anagram of Derek Faker, 100% made up, yet the possession happened. So what's interesting again though, you'd think that would be the end of Derek Akura's career. It wasn't. It was just a blip. And people who believed in him were actually mad at Kieran for doing such a thing. So that when belief is strong, it is incredibly difficult to change. So what else do my students look for when we go on a ghost hunt? Temperature change is a big one. So if you watch any of the ghost hunting shows, they'll go into an area like, oh, it's cold here, and it looks kind of dramatic, and they have the scary music, and it's dark. But when my students do this, like, yeah, there's temperature change. It's usually by the windows or doors. Like, correct. That's it, because we do it in a lot of old buildings, right? So yeah, they're drafty sometimes. Does that mean ghost? Probably not. And then I tell them to search for orbs. Really, what I'm trying to do is replicate what the ghost hunters are doing, right? And then give this earthly explanation for their seemingly paranormal events. So orbs supposedly are signs of ghosts and so on. They show up in photographs, but they are not visible to the naked eye. This is one of our ghost hunts at the Stony Plain Multicultural Center. You can see some orbs here. And another photo that was taken by one of my students. All kinds of orbs. If you were a ghost hunter, this would blow your mind. But an orb can be created if you use your flash and it is dusty, or if there's any rain, mist, anything in the air. This night, it was just snowing a little bit, and we had all kinds of orbs. Very, very easy to make. It's also an artifact of digital cameras, but it's usually just the case that it's dust or some moisture in the air. Turn your flash on, you will get orbs. So I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of orbs. Now what about if you see something out of the corner of your eye? It just feels like something's watching you. I get the students to try to recreate this, and I talk about pareidolia. So again, the way we're hardwired, we're pattern seekers, especially for faces. So pareidolia is when we see meaningful visual stimuli in meaningless stimuli. So there's some leaves there, but this is on one of the ghost sites, and supposedly it's someone haunting them or a grandparent or something. But we can see this anywhere. Yeah, we've got a face in the clouds. We've got an angry onion. And this is my favorite, Pennywise and bacon. So the students take a lot of photos, and I tell them, do as much as you can to see if you can get some photos that look kind of creepy. And one of the best ones we had, there was a haunting at this old house. It was 100 years old, and supposedly there was a man in a top hat that would be seen in the upper windows. So we went outside, and we were taking all kinds of photos. We couldn't get it. We couldn't see anything that looked like that. Then a car drove by, and the way the lights went off a tree and reflected kind of looked like a person that was with a top hat in the window. There you go. We got it. Now, what was interesting about that one as well is there was also supposedly a ghost in the basement. At the time I did this, it was at a marketing firm. So it's a marketing firm that bought the house. And they said, I was talking to the person who was the CEO, and he said, look, we don't really believe this kind of thing, but I did bring in a medium. Okay. And he took me down to this room, and my students investigated this room in great detail, and they said there's the ghost of a little girl here. So what they did is they put in a teddy bear just so she'd have something to play with. Yeah, I know. Now, it's a marketing firm, right? So he said, what we call this room is the dead girl room. That's the best they could come up with. I actually don't think they're there anymore. So the students are looking for pareidolia and general feelings of unease. I asked them to take a lot of notes. Anything feels a bit strange. And this ties into some research that I've done. So often when you go into these old buildings, you might actually have these feelings of unease. That is real. You might not know why, though. Is anybody familiar, just by show of hands, what infrasound is? Couple, oh great, great. So it's a low frequency sound, below 20 hertz. You can't hear it, but you can feel it. So the way to think about it, if you've ever been to a concert and there's a lot of bass, you can kind of feel it in your chest, the hair on the back of your neck might go up, and you know what it's from the music. But imagine those things happened, no music. It just happens. It can be created by thunder, traffic, and importantly for us, low rumbling pipes. Old places tend to be supposedly haunted. Old places also tend to have low rumbling pipes. So when you're in the basement, you might feel something, and you legitimately do. There's a very good chance it could be infrasound. And Susan was talking earlier about how we need to be empathetic, right? So if you're somebody that believes in ghosts, and there's all kinds of shows on TV and so on, and you go into this old building, and all of a sudden you've got this pressure in your chest. The hair on the back of your neck goes up. It's dark, it's scary. It's not unreasonable to think ghost, right? When in fact, it could simply be infrasound. Now it's hard to test. We ordered a mic. Most mics don't pick up infrasound, so we ordered one. It's like $13,000. We got it on sale for $8,000, which is still a ripoff. But if you want to do a very simple test if there's infrasound, I built some infrasound speakers. This is one of them here. Just light a match or get a lighter. And what you'll see is that as the infrasound is turned on, it'll start to move. This is a lot of infrasound, but then it'll start to kind of turn. Yeah, there we go. That's a good sign that there's infrasound there. So it's right beside the speaker. That's a lot. What's more common and what I find in our ghost hunts is that the flame will just kind of bend in the middle. So it's not that it's blowing over because of a breeze or a draft. It's right in the middle where it kind of bends. So if you're ever curious, the bigger the flame, the better if you're using a lighter. And if it starts to bend a little bit or if it starts to turn like that, there's infrasound there. Now, I've done some research on infrasound. I built off something known as the Haunt Project. Some researchers in the UK did this. They set up a room, and it was basically this. It's a white room. It was low-level light. They had EMF, and they had infrasound, and they had people walk around the room for 45 minutes. They wanted to see if, when the infrasound was on versus off, among other things, if people would report more kind of frightening experiences and so on. But they didn't find anything. So we looked at this very, very cool study. Great idea, but we thought, well, 45 minutes just walking around a room, maybe it's just too boring, right? So we thought if it's associated with fear, what if you added some fearful stimuli? That's what we did. Has anybody been to Dedmonton? Okay, great. Dedmonton is a commercial haunted house. And I know the owner. It's amazing. It's Hollywood level special effects. Really, really well done. So we brought in some volunteers, and this was in off hours. So normally Dedmonton has a bunch of actors. The actors weren't there, but as you can see, this is a photo from Dedmonton. The props are quite frightening. And they went into Dedmonton. We took them into the basement. It used to be at the Paramount Theater. It's since moved. And the infrasound was either on or off. We had 2 infrasound speakers. We had them hooked up to heart rate monitors, GoPro cameras. They had to fill out scales. And we simply wanted to see if the experience became more frightening when the infrasound was on. Now, as I said, we hooked up GoPro cameras, so I'll show you just a quick bit of footage of what our participants in this study saw. Apologize for the volume. So there it is. Now, and what you heard in the background, they actually heard that too. We built these infrasound speakers, but speakers aren't meant to do that. So there's just a little bit of a grinding sound from the speaker. So we put that loud music over top just to cover that. It didn't impact the infrasound levels. It was just a way of masking that little bit of grinding sound. Now, needless to say, our ethics board had concerns. So, what we had to do was always have somebody that could see them. But we didn't want to be in their presence, right? So we didn't want to throw anything off. So I spent months with a small flashlight following people around Dedmonton. And at one point, I was pushing this bloody skull aside. And this is weird. This is so weird. And my favorite reaction there, and we told them that we're there, so if they needed help or needed to get out, we could come help them quickly. So at one point, one of the participants said, "Okay, I'm stopping now. I'm sitting down. I'll be fine. Just leave me for a second." No problem. No problem. And they were fine. They were fine. So what did we find? Unfortunately, after months of work, we had a lot of problems. We had technical problems. We had some problems with the equipment. And it was strictly volunteer-based. A lot of people didn't show up. The only result that kind of held up We found when the infrasound was on, people went through Edmonton faster than when it was off. Kind of interesting, but we really can't say anything about that. So what we did is we decided to bring it into the lab with a little bit more control. People came into a lab at MacEwan, and we played them some music that was either calming or unsettling. And I'll play that for you in a second. And that was either in the presence or absence of infrasound. We had them fill out some scales after, and we also got some physiological measures. We measured cortisol. We just measured it through saliva, and that is associated with stress. It's a hormone associated with stress. So we want to see if the cortisol levels actually change in the presence of infrasound. So people came into the lab, they were told the infrasound might be on or off, and they either heard the calming music, which was this, went on for about 5 minutes, or they heard something unsettling, which was this, and eventually that starts to clank and things like that too. So that's what the stimuli were. So what did we find? Under these strict experimental controls, things went quite a bit better. We didn't actually find anything on ratings of fear, but what we did find is that when the infrasound was on, people felt more irritated. And you can see that there's definitely a difference between the calming music and the unsettling noise. And we also found differences in cortisol. When the infrasound was on, there was a change in cortisol levels, indicating that people felt more stress, which is pretty interesting. So right now, this paper is under review, so hopefully this will be published shortly. We're fighting with a reviewer, so we shall see, but we're getting there. When I talk to students about this, I like to think of it almost like it's an immunization from fear. So when you go into these old houses, you feel this tension and this fear. But once you know all of this, the fear should kind of be gone, right? But sometimes it's fun to be afraid. So I do tell the students this. I said, okay, if you're a bump in the middle of the night, it's probably not a ghost. But there was a case in Tokyo where a man would leave his apartment, lock the doors, come back, doors are still locked, but food would be gone. And this was going on for a year, and he was starting to think maybe it's something ghostly. Brought the police in, and it turns out somebody had been living in a cabinet in his house or apartment for a year. I'm not making it up. So I tell my students, if you hear a bump in the middle of the night, it's not a ghost, but go check it out because it might be something. So how do we confront pseudoscience? What's the takeaway? We need to promote rational thinking. Earlier, Susan mentioned the Lilienfeld Alliance. So we have a conference coming up in July 10th and 11th. It's on the teaching of rational skepticism. And we use rational skepticism because critical thinking is such a broad term now, it can kind of almost mean anything. We're talking about the things I've been discussing today. So really helping people distinguish good information from bad. If you are an educator, join the group. It's free to join. Basically, we're just sharing resources, and we've got a great conference coming up. We've got Joe Schwartz, Tom Gilovich, among others. It's going to be a great one. It's July 10th and 11th. And I think what else we need to do is we need to start teaching this much, much earlier. I teach a 400 level psychology class. Now, by that point, most students are pretty good. Like I say, there's still some things they believe in, but I've also been going to schools. So I've gone to junior high schools. I've done mini ghost hunts there. We just make it up. Your school is haunted. So they buy it. It works great. You turn the lights off, it's haunted. It works. I really genuinely believe that when we start teaching kids about science, we should be talking about scientific skepticism as well. We need to be teaching them, again, how to determine what's good information and what's bad, especially since they have so much access to information on social media. So I think what we really need to do to promote rational thinking is start sooner and do more to get kids engaged. And pre-bunking has been shown to work. Let's go back to conspiracy theories. Like I said, if you believe that reptilians are controlling the world, that's tough. But if you tell somebody before they hear this story in the first place and say, okay, somebody might tell you down the road that the world is controlled by half human, half reptiles. That sounds pretty strange, right? Do you want to know what the best evidence is? This. Here we have a photo of Hillary Clinton, but you can see, kind of, sort of looks like a reptile eye. That's the best evidence. Go online, you can find a million of these, they all look the same. And you could just tell someone, look, that's just an artifact of the flash and where they're standing. Now, somebody knowing that and going into one of those talks, they're not going to be convinced at all, right? Whereas somebody who doesn't have that information might be persuaded, because some of the people that are purveyors of pseudoscience, as you all know, are very good at it. They're charismatic, they seem trustworthy, it's easy to be fooled. Pre-bunking helps, so how do we pre-bunk? Again, earlier education. That's really the key. And when we're talking to others, sometimes it can be incredibly frustrating, right? But think about our brains. We're pattern seekers, and again, high IQ is not associated with a disbelief in pseudoscience. In fact, high IQ is associated with being better able to support your arguments. What I find this does, and I talk to my students about it, it allows you to take a step back, almost like you're watching the conversation. So instead of debating the facts, think about what's going on in their brain. How do you help them? Now, you're not going to change somebody's mind in a single shot, but you might get them thinking about some things, right? What we need is people to convince themselves. So we give them resources, we give them ideas, and fundamentally, we become empathetic. We try to put ourselves in their head. Okay, why do they believe this? Where is it coming from? Where did they get the information? If we do that, we have a much better chance of, one, having a good conversation, and two, at least planting the seed that perhaps at some point they will change their minds. And with that, we have 1 minute for questions? 1 minute. It was 55 plus or minus 2, so I still got my 1 minute. Does anybody have one quick question? Yeah, at the back, go ahead.
No.
Oh, no?
Yeah.
No questions?
No, there's a question.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. Oh, sorry, okay, yeah.
Do you address conversations with students with topics such as quantum entanglement, where if one particle of a pair changes, the matching particle thousands of kilometers away changes? Example, concepts that are science-based but could appear as pseudoscience.
I don't. And so the question was, do you address things like quantum entanglement, which is really interesting and can seem pseudoscientific. And the thing about quantum is that that word is used a lot in pseudoscience. It's used wrong. So I don't go into the science behind it as much. I have thought about bringing in somebody from the physics department to talk about that, because you need somebody with that level of expertise. But what I do say is that if you hear the word quantum and it is not directly related to quantum physics, you should be incredibly suspicious. It's not always wrong, but probably. So I touch on it, but I don't go deep.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.